I'm Cindy, and welcome to this week's edition of Pearls of Liberty. Today is April 14th, 2012. It happens to be the weekend after Easter. But Easter seems like it was a month ago or something. The weeks lately are so filled with information and events that it's almost difficult to keep track of time. One very significant quote that we would like to put out there this week is that yesterday Alex Jones said, "Join the Republic or be prepared to get physical." And we don't know for a fact that he's referring to RuSA, but it seems like that's definitely a possibility.
I think so, and especially at the end of his comment, and he said, that's enough. You know how he will often stop himself from going on to covering more information. He knew, in my opinion, that the words he was saying were significant, and he limited them and didn't want to get into more detail. But I thought it was very significant that he said, join the Republic or be prepared to get physical. And that's what he sees as coming down. And the preface to that was he said the Republic can be revived. And then he said, join the Republic or be prepared to get physical. So he, I believe, is letting people know that he knows that the Republic is the non-violent solution, as the slogan is the peaceful solution. So made me feel that he's telling people that the path that we're on is a good path. So that's a good thing.
And that it is always nice to be affirmed a little bit, even if it was in kind of a non-specific way. And we do know more or less that we in this country are responsible for what goes on in this country. We are aware of that in a general sense because of the form of government that we have, government of the people, by the people, and for the people. If a tyrant attempts to take over our government, it's our responsibility to see that he doesn't. Or if a group of tyrants, in this case the banking cabal. And Benjamin Fulford, who we tend to believe, stated this week that some other things are being addressed on a world scale, the banking cabal and so on and so forth, and we'll get into that a little bit more in a minute or two, but that people in America would have to step up to the plate, and I'm not quoting him, but that we need to accept responsibility for what is happening in this country. And the Republic is certainly a very positive way to do that. And the Republic is has a lot of good things on the horizon right now.
There really does need to be an accelerated awakening in America. Awakening is already happening, but there's a lot of people that still have this false sense of security that because we are a, quote, democracy, which we're not, we're a republic, that going to the ballot box and voting when there's an election ensures that we get representation. And the fact that most people believe that just shows you the depth of deception that we're under. People don't realize that both parties have been taken over by, to put it simply, the Goldman Sachs international banking cabal, with Goldman Sachs in the lead. So there, I think, will be a greater awakening when it's revealed how deep this deception is and to what extent that are the leaders, the representatives, have sold us out. And the foundation for that couldn't be more clear, because the Federal Reserve is not federal, and that's what's supplying the money system. So what that ensures is that the offshore interests under which the Federal Reserve operates ensures that their people get the funds. And that's been the whole simple strategy of this takeover. And we need to get past the point of thinking that because we go to the polls and vote, that means that we're modern and we have a representational democracy. people need to begin to scratch the surface. Many people are, but it needs to accelerate. People need to see, wait a minute, why are the banks running things? The people in 2008 were unanimous against passing this TARP program and the bailouts, but it happened anyway. And more things have happened, even that Congress didn't want. So there is a mass awakening beginning, but it does need to accelerate, because one of the things that we'll cover in a minute is that the people that are going to be doing the action on the ground level of arresting those that have violated the Constitution need to have the support of the people.
Sure, and it's interesting to think what forms that might take. And of course, what we've discussed the last couple of weeks, the Drake idea seems aggressive and not necessarily peaceful. It seems like a large show of force. A lot of people in the Republic tend to have the approach of just provide a better system, and people will leave the failing system in droves. And that's why the Republic is called the peaceful solution. And the Republic is really just beginning to come into its own, with funding being released probably in just a few weeks, and a lot of resources coming in. We've heard that there are 4 million people who have signed up to join the Republic because they want to participate in the land patent process that's being made available through the Republic. Now, that's not the same as the Drake thing. This is all based on law and the Constitution, and it's not really a sovereignty movement. It's to some extent it's a patriot movement, but it has as its foundation law and the Constitution. We're not just a bunch of people out there getting off hip shots. There's a direction and a foundation.
The direction and the foundation is not anti-sovereign. It's not, but it's not hyper-sovereign, is I think the way that I would put it. It's based on law and it going back to the Constitution. And like we covered last week, there's a divergence on how to assert your independence and your God-given natural rights, that the national or the sovereign states movement, or the nation states movement, versus the constitutional republic movement. So the cards are getting laid on the table now, and the first cards to have been played semi-publicly with the Drake interviews by David Wilcock are the ones for the nation states. And yet there still are some people, apparently in Idaho, that are saying we're not a part of the nation states, but we did file independence stuff with The Hague, and yet that seems to be not necessarily a part of the Republic for the United States either. So there's a lot of stuff flying around, and it will all get sorted out in the end. But one of the most exciting things we just read today, that came out I think yesterday, was the announcement from David Wilcock that there have been liens filed against the 12 Federal Reserve banks, and that's serious stuff. And this is what the military, via the announcement of Drake, said was that they would need to have a foundation upon which to make arrests, and that foundation is being laid with these liens against these now insolvent banks having been filed.
And this isn't something that you're going to read about in the New York Times. This is based on intel and sources from which news we're not accustomed to receiving. So we take it somewhat with a grain of salt. Another source of information that we have related to following an investment is it has been stated that, now this was actually a quote from Reuters, and I'm not quoting directly, I'm paraphrasing, but that China is, the status of the yuan, YUAN, their currency, is changing and becoming more an integral part of world finance, just as of today, Saturday the 14th. And a source of information that we typically believe stated that some significant world financial decisions are no longer in the hands of the U.S. Treasury, but have been taken over by BRICS: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. So the degree of truth in this is it's unclear, but it makes sense based on what we know. And do some research and see what you think.
Right, it's a very interesting time, and don't expect, as Cindy said, to see it on the nightly news. You have to dig for this information on the internet, and that doesn't mean it's kooky or not real. What you have to do is get to the point where you recognize that you're being lied to by the mainstream media, and then begin to seek out truth. And we're sharing with you what we find when we do that. We do think that the evidence is that major change is in the works, and it will lead us into a major shift. That one aspect of that is the long prophesied wealth transfer. Another aspect of that is a scrambling for power and influence in as the republic begins to reform in America, and as the bad guys go down and as the good guys begin to be recognized for who they are. So we'll keep you informed as we learn things, but we encourage you to do your digging on your own.
And interestingly enough, as we've mentioned before and kind of implied, there is a huge amount of disinfo, and it seems like this is a time in which some various organizations that we're aware of are going through a season of attack from people who used to once be supporters, and it just seems kind of like a sign of the times right now. Even an MLM that we participate in that has an excellent product, we're not extremely active, but we do receive their communications, and I often delete them, but I happened to notice one yesterday that a gentleman who had at one time been an integral part of this MLM had been gone, has come back, now is suing them, leveling all kinds of accusations against them. And this is, as I said, it's kind of like a sign of the times. It feels like this pattern is being repeated in different settings that we're aware of.
Yeah, I think it's what I kind of referred to earlier as being the shift and the vying for power when the foundation shifts. And some of that is normal and good, and some of that is ego-driven and not for the good of the general public. So it's up to us to try to discern which is which, and it's not always the people that are saying, you guys are shutting us out, you're being bad, let us in. One of the easy examples that comes to mind that's been often mentioned by people that are following things at the national level is that Obama has a cousin named Odinga in Kenya that was actually told to start riots when he lost the election, and therefore after that he received a position within the new government. So It's a strategy of those that want power to make as much noise as possible, and it's not always a good thing for the people in power to say, or the people new to power, to say, well, we want to make sure we have your voice too, so let's include you. Because it may not be a truly lawful representation that is happening. It may be couched in those terms, but that might be just a cover. So it's time for an extreme discernment and not to take things on face value.
Could you reiterate, I know you've talked about it the last couple times, but it's so foundational. Could you just talk a little bit about being offended and having a reactionary response to things that's out of that, what you called spirit of offense?
Yeah, the spirit of offense is oftentimes when somebody feels that they're entitled to a position of power based on whatever they've done, either recognized or not recognized, or some values that they hold that they feel are very important. If they're not given a place at the table, they can begin to operate under a spirit of offense and begin to lash out and actually destroy some of the things that people can build together if they come together. So this type of infighting is unfortunately too common among us humans. It certainly happened with the original foundation of the American Republic and the Constitutional Congress and all of that. You had people with varying degrees of understanding of liberty in various positions and positions of power that they didn't want to lose, that had to be accommodated one way or the other. But the important thing is to be focused on the good of the whole and not a private agenda. And that private agenda can include all kinds of things that you think are good about God and about setting up a foundation in a godly republic. But if it doesn't honor the principles of God in a lawful way, then we really need to check ourselves and see what kind of spirit we're operating out of, if it's a spirit of offense or not. One example of that is, I won't get into details here, but in the de facto government, we are used to seeing people that a government that's very lax in its voting standards. You know, it's joked about vote early, vote often, Chicago dead people voting, illegal immigrants voting. You don't even need a picture ID for voting in regular de facto elections. But you do need to have voter ID or some kind of a picture ID to vote in union elections, that type of hypocrisy. So that's an example of how common voter fraud is in the de facto, and yet in the de jure foundation of the new republic, you get people that I believe are operating out of a spirit of offense, that are saying the people's voice isn't being heard, but the people are not, that they're referring to, don't actually have the foundation of the documents being filed to be valid members of the republic. So that is the type of thing that I'm talking about. You have to dig a little deeper. You have to not take things at face value. What's being said about the voice for the people is not always what's happening. The words may sound good, but dig deeper and find out what's really going on.
Good advice. And if someone comes to you and is talking to you about that they have a problem, they think there's something wrong, be cautious, because what they're saying may or may not be true and correct. It may be partial truth, their point of view. If you're familiar with the Bible, you know that both in the Old and New Testament, there's a principle of multiple witnesses. The punishments in the Old Testament were very severe. You could be stoned for certain offenses that we wouldn't take that seriously. For instance, a child speaking in a disrespectful manner to parents. However, it wasn't accusations couldn't easily be leveled. There had to be at least 2 witnesses, and sometimes 3 witnesses, and things were not done on circumstantial evidence. So as you're hearing accusations against people, try to remember this in the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses. If there aren't 2 or 3 people who have actually had the experience, not just people who have agreed to accept the spirit of offense, but people who have actually seen and been present when things were happening, just be cautious and try to, dig for yourself. Don't let people spoon-fed you. We're used to that because of the media. But as Don said, do your own research and find the facts for yourself and then make your decision.
And oftentimes the enemy will have the first word. And one of the other principles or proverbs that you'll find in the Bible is that, I'm paraphrasing of course, but the first witness appears to be correct until the second one comes along. So the strategy that's often used, I would say oftentimes from a spiritual sense, is to get the word out that people will believe, and then when a more complete truth comes out later, the people won't be able to hear it because they've already clamped down on this first truth that's been, or that they've swallowed, that may not really be the whole truth, may be mixed with lies, maybe given with an agenda in mind. And that's why I'm saying keep an open mind when you hear stuff that is bashing a person or a people or a movement. Don't take that as being the truth until you've said, I'd like to know more about this, and then see if you can find the other side.
Is there anything that you'd like to say in closing?
Just the sleeping giant of American liberty is awakening. Take heart. It's a wonderful thing.